Welcome to The Explainer. We usually think of wisdom as something you get from, well, getting older, right? From experience. But what if it's not something you earn, but something you're given? That's the powerful idea we're diving into today, all coming from a sermon by Dr. Preetha Judson about the spiritual gift of wisdom.
Okay, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll nail down what this gift really is. Then, we'll talk about how it's different from just knowing stuff. We'll see it in action with some amazing examples, figure out its source, and wrap up by looking at the huge impact it can have on your whole outlook on life. All right, let's jump right in. When we hear this term gift of wisdom, what are we actually talking about here? So, the sermon puts a really fine point on this. It's not about what you can learn in a book or a classroom. It's about what you can receive.
Yeah, so this has nothing to do with your IQ or how clever you are. The sermon describes it almost like a divine download. It's this unique ability to look at a regular earthly situation, but see it from a heavenly perspective. It's like getting to see the entire GPS map instead of just the next turn right in front of you.
But, this kind of brings up an obvious question, right? Isn't wisdom just super advanced knowledge? Well, the sermon makes a really strong case that, nope, they are two completely different things.
And here's how it breaks down the difference. Think of knowledge as all the ingredients you have on your kitchen counter. The facts, the data, all the stuff you've gathered. But this gift of wisdom, that's like the divine recipe. It tells you how to put it all together and, maybe more importantly, why it's going to work. So knowledge tells you what is on the counter. Wisdom tells you how and why to make the perfect meal out of it.
Okay, that all sounds great in theory, but what does it actually look like in practice? The sermon gives us three really powerful stories from the Bible to make this whole idea crystal clear.
So, first up, we have Moses. And he's got this huge job. He's been tasked with building a holy tabernacle right in the middle of a desert. No small feat.
And get this, he wasn't just handed a set of blueprints, like an IKEA instruction manual. The text says God showed him the actual pattern that existed in heaven. It was a direct revelation. He got a peek at a heavenly reality and was told, okay, build that.
And that is where this gift of wisdom comes in. It gave Moses the incredible ability to see that divine model and figure out how to translate it into a physical thing here on earth. All the construction knowledge in the world couldn't do that. It took a totally different kind of insight. Okay, so from building a thing, we move on to leading a nation. The next example is Joshua, who had to take over from Moses. Talk about having big shoes to fill. How in the world was he going to get the same level of respect?
Well, the key wasn't his resume or how many years he'd been an apprentice. The source says he was full of the spirit of wisdom, precisely because Moses had laid his hands on him. It was imparted to him.
And that wisdom, the wisdom he received, is what gave him real authority. It wasn't about his job title. The people could just see it in him. They recognized this divine insight, and that's why they listened. The gift itself is what legitimized his leadership.
All right, our last case study is maybe the most dramatic. We have Daniel stuck in a king's court, and he's facing a literally impossible task. The king gives him this crazy, almost cruel challenge. He says, I had a dream. I'm not going to tell you what it was. You have to tell me what I dreamed, and then you have to tell me what it means. Come on. No amount of logic or brain power is going to solve that. It's a total dead end for human intellect. This is just a perfect example of this divine wisdom taking over where knowledge completely fails. Daniel couldn't analyze his way to the answer. It had to be a pure revelation. And this insight, this gift, it didn't just save his life and the lives of his friends. It solved a major crisis for the whole kingdom and made him one of the king's most trusted advisors.
Okay, so these examples are pretty compelling. But if you can't learn this stuff in school, where does it come from? How do you get it?
Well, the sermon is really clear on this. You can't earn it like a promotion at work. You can't cram for it like a final exam. It's presented as exactly what the name says, a gift. It's a divine endowment from the Holy Spirit, something you receive, often by asking for it in prayer.
So what's the big deal? Why is this gift so important? If a person actually gets this kind of wisdom, what changes for them? What's the real-world impact?
The bottom line here is that this gift is a complete game changer. It gives you solutions to problems that seem impossible. It helps bring order when everything feels like chaos. It makes what you say carry real weight and power. And the sermon even points out that it can cause a visible change. Remember Moses coming down the mountain? His face was literally shining because he had been in God's presence. It's that profound. So really, what we're talking about is a total reorientation of your life. It's the difference between trying to find your way using a paper street map versus using a live satellite view. Suddenly you see the traffic jams ahead, the shortcuts, the bigger picture. You see things you just can't see when you're stuck down at street level.
And that really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. How different would our decisions be? How might our lives change if we approached wisdom not as something we have to earn, but as a gift we can actually receive? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in to this explainer.